Preserving chicken without a refrigerator might sound like a challenge fit for a survivalist reality show. But for the Amish, it's just part of everyday life. With a treasure trove of time-honored techniques passed down through generations, they've mastered the art of keeping poultry fresh in ways that might surprise you. In a world where modern conveniences reign supreme, the Amish approach food preservation with creativity and resourcefulness that are truly inspiring. Join us as we explore these fascinating methods that blend tradition and practicality, offering a glimpse into a lifestyle that thrives on simplicity and sustainability. Ever tried burying a meal? Sounds bizarre, right? But for the Amish, storing chicken underground makes perfect sense, and honestly, it works. Picture this: no humming fridge in the corner, no worrying about freezer burn, just plain old dirt and some clever thinking. The ground has been humanity's cooler long before electricity came along, and for the Amish, it's like having a hidden pantry that's always set at the right temperature. No bill, no maintenance. It's kind of like tucking your food in for a long nap. And believe me, nothing is more satisfying than digging out a meal you stashed weeks ago, knowing it's been chilling beneath your feet all this time. See, the magic lies in how stable the temperature stays once you dig deep enough, kind of like how caves are always cool no matter how hot it gets outside. Underground storage works because bacteria and mold hate consistent coolness. If the weather gets too warm, spoilage kicks into high gear, but under the earth, things slow down. The Amish figured out they don't need a metal box plugged into the wall when nature already offers the perfect solution. And here's a fun fact: people have used underground storage for food since ancient times. Some archaeologists discovered pits used for preserving meat that date back over 12,000 years. That's a long tradition of trusting the dirt. Of course, not just any old hole will do. It has to be deep enough to keep the meat safe, but not so deep that you feel like you're auditioning for a role in The Great Escape. Some Amish families dig root cellars, mini underground rooms lined with wood or stone. It's cool, dark, and dry, the perfect environment for slowing down spoilage. If you want to see true genius, watch how they pack things. Chicken gets wrapped tightly in cloth and sometimes a bit of wax paper, just enough to keep dirt out, but still let the meat breathe. I tried it once after hearing a friend talk about it, and digging a hole in my backyard to stash a roast was oddly satisfying. The real challenge came later, remembering exactly where I put it. One time, I forgot about it for a week longer than planned and worried I'd have a science project waiting for me underground. But nope, the meat was as fresh as the day I buried it. It's amazing how much stress disappears when you don't need to monitor a fridge all day, hoping your leftovers survive another 24 hours. And the taste? Somehow richer, more flavorful, like the earth gave it a little seasoning of its own. Interestingly, early American settlers also used underground storage to get through rough winters when fresh food was scarce. While we depend on electricity to survive, these methods remind you that simpler solutions still work, and often better than modern ones. There's a certain joy in knowing you can outsmart time without technology. It's almost like saying, take that, 21st century. If you ask me, it's one of those rare times when digging in the dirt feels more rewarding than checking an app. There's something special about the smell of smoked meat. It brings memories of BBQs, lazy summer afternoons, and that one uncle who insists on showing off his grilling skills every chance he gets. But for the Amish, smoking chicken isn't just about flavor. It's about making sure that meat stays edible for months without refrigeration. In fact, this method is as old as time. Native Americans and early settlers relied heavily on smoking to get through harsh winters when fresh meat wasn't exactly within arm's reach. The Amish still carry that tradition, turning every chicken into a piece of art and a survival tool. The science behind it is pretty clever. When wood burns, it releases chemicals that not only give the meat that signature smoky flavor, but also act as natural preservatives. Think of it like seasoning your food while scaring off the nasty bacteria. Plus, the slow drying that happens during the process reduces moisture content in the meat. Less moisture means fewer places for bacteria to throw a party. It's a win-win, delicious and safe. I always found it funny that the same process used to make gourmet BBQ is also one of the oldest ways to stop your dinner from going bad. When I first tried smoking meat myself, I felt like I was part chef, part scientist, and part caveman all at once. The tricky part is keeping the fire going just right, Not too hot, not too cold, kind of like babysitting a toddler who can set things on fire. And of course, there's the fun debate over which type of wood to use. The Amish often stick with hardwoods like hickory or oak, which add robust flavors, though some families have secret wood blends they swear by. One Amish farmer I met even joked, "We'd tell you what wood we use, but then we'd have to smoke you too." It's no surprise that smoked chicken not only survives for months, but tastes better the longer it's left to rest. Something magical happens during that waiting period, like how chili always tastes better the next day. And here's the kicker. Once the chicken is smoked and stored properly, it doesn't need any other special care. It's ready when you are. Whether you want to chop it up for soups, slice it for sandwiches, or just snack on it plain, the flavor is always a pleasant surprise. Even if you're not into camping or survival scenarios, having some smoked chicken tucked away feels oddly empowering, like you've beaten modern life at its own game. The only product we'll ever promote on our channel is a book by Claude Davis, a veteran prepper, about 126 superfoods and preservation methods from crisis times like the Great Depression and wartime that are impossible to find elsewhere. We decided to promote his book because we are the last generation able to share these techniques and superfoods to our children or grandchildren. It would be a shame to see this information about highly nutritious foods and preservation methods to survive crises disappear. You can also find a book about herbal remedies from Nicole Apelian on their store. If you're watching this on TV, you can look up our channel, Frugal Solutions, on your phone or tablet and find the books by clicking the link in our channel description or any other video description. When most people think of canning, they picture jars filled with jams or pickles, not exactly something that screams dinner. But the Amish? They've mastered the art of stuffing just about anything into jars, including chicken. The process might sound like something out of a sci-fi lab. Airtight seals, sterilization, bacteria getting annihilated. But it's all pretty straightforward once you see it in action. You take fresh chicken, pop it into a jar, and use a pressure canner to seal it up so tight even the tiniest microbes have no chance of sneaking in. What you're left with is shelf-stable chicken that can last years just sitting there in the pantry, waiting to be turned into dinner. The first time I heard someone say they had chicken in a jar, I thought they were messing with me. But no, it's a real thing. And the best part? It's surprisingly tasty. When you crack open a jar months or even years after sealing it, the chicken inside is as good as the day it went in. My favorite part of this method is the reactions it gets. Just casually dropping, "Oh yeah, I canned some chicken the other day," into a conversation will get you all kinds of looks. It's one of those things that sounds weird until you try it. Then it becomes one of those tricks you wonder how you ever lived without. The process itself is fascinating. Once the jars are sealed under high pressure, the chicken is basically in suspended animation, like some kind of time traveler, waiting for its moment to shine. And the Amish love how practical it is. There's no need to worry about power outages, spoiled meat, or fancy appliances. If the world decided to end tomorrow, those jars would still be there, filled with chicken and ready for whatever apocalypse cooking you need to do. Canning chicken isn't just for emergencies, though. It makes regular life a whole lot easier, too. If you've ever had one of those days when cooking sounds like climbing a mountain, knowing there's already cooked chicken sitting in a jar is like winning the food lottery. Pull it out, heat it up, and bam, dinner's ready. No defrosting, no stress, and definitely no sad microwave meals. In terms of food preservation, canning is pure genius. It's not just about locking in freshness, but also peace of mind. You know that feeling when you find a questionable Tupperware in the fridge and have to guess how long it's been there? Yeah, you don't get that with jars. They're like little time capsules, neatly labeled and ready whenever you need them. And the best part? Canned chicken lasts about 3 to 5 years if done right. Imagine that, a meal waiting for you, years down the road, as if to say, "Don't worry, I've got your back." Here's where things get weird, in a good way. Fermenting chicken is one of those ideas that makes you raise an eyebrow at first, but once you get it, it's like, of course that works. The Amish didn't just stumble upon this method. They knew that when the right kind of bacteria takes over, it kicks the bad bacteria to the curb. Think of it as giving your chicken an all-natural security system. What might sound like a science experiment gone wrong is actually an ancient method that turns spoilage into something tasty and safe. The idea is simple. Instead of fearing bacteria, the Amish invite the good ones to party. In a controlled ferment, these helpful little microbes multiply, transforming the meat with unique flavors while preserving it. This might bring up memories of things like kimchi or sauerkraut, but don't get too excited. Fermented chicken doesn't taste like either. It's in a flavor category all its own, and to some, it's an acquired taste. Honestly, explaining fermented chicken to someone who's never heard of it is a bit like telling them you made chicken yogurt. People get that same confused look, half curious, half horrified. It's one of those things you almost have to try for yourself to understand, but once you do, it clicks. It's all about trust in the process. The good bacteria win every time, leaving behind a unique flavor that might just surprise you. This kind of fermentation isn't just some niche foodie trend, though. Cultures across the globe have been doing it for centuries. In Northern Europe, fermented fish has been a staple for ages, and in the Arctic, indigenous people have fermented meat and fat to survive brutal winters. The Amish know they're in good company with this method. It's not about chasing exotic flavors, but about survival. And sometimes, survival just happens to taste pretty good. Some things never go out of style, and rubbing meat with salt is one of them. This technique feels almost ancient because it is. Sailors, traders, and armies have relied on salt to keep their food from turning into a science project for centuries. The Amish, they just carry on the tradition, treating salt like the VIP guest in their chicken preservation toolkit. When you cover meat in salt, the magic lies in how it pulls out moisture. Less moisture means fewer places for bacteria to hang out and cause trouble. It's like giving your chicken an invisible force field, only this one tastes pretty good. There's something oddly satisfying about the process. You take a piece of chicken, rub it generously with salt, and wait. It feels like an experiment in patience. But the result? A toughened, flavorful meat that can last far beyond what you'd expect from anything left out of the fridge. And when it's time to use it, a quick soak or rinse revives the chicken, making it surprisingly tender and ready to cook. It's almost poetic. What starts off as fresh and juicy gets dried and preserved, only to be reborn as something edible and delicious once again. If you think about it, the concept isn't too far from mummification, except at the end, you're not just admiring it, you're frying it up for dinner. Salt-cured meat was so reliable that ships in the 1800s wouldn't dare set sail without it. Long voyages across unpredictable oceans meant fresh food was out of the question, and the only thing standing between sailors and starvation was salted meat. It's hard to argue with a preservation technique that once kept people alive through storms and battles and still finds a place in Amish kitchens today. Every now and then, even the most traditional Amish households dabble in slightly modern tools, like pressure cookers. Sure, they might shy away from electricity, but when it comes to making sure chicken stays edible for months or even years, the practicality wins out. A pressure cooker isn't just some fancy pot. It's like a preservation superhero in disguise. Using heat and high pressure, it wipes out bacteria and locks in flavor. The result? A piece of chicken that feels like it's been frozen in time, but tastes like it was cooked yesterday. What's fascinating is how the Amish manage to keep things simple while using these cookers. They aren't interested in trendy kitchen gadgets, just solutions that get the job done. Think of it like a food time capsule, a sealed jar of goodness you can open months later and enjoy as if no time has passed. And let's be honest, there's something oddly satisfying about knowing a meal you made today could still be waiting for you 10 years from now. If this all sounds a bit futuristic, it really isn't. In fact, pressure-cooked food has been a go-to method for doomsday preppers and astronauts for ages. With proper storage, pressure-cooked meals can last a decade without batting an eye. The Amish probably aren't preparing for the apocalypse, but they are preparing for life's little hiccups, like winter storms or long days in the fields when cooking feels like a chore. And in the end, that jar of chicken isn't just food, it's peace of mind in edible form. Ever wonder what would happen if jerky and trail mix teamed up? You get something like pemmican, an ancient food that's as practical as it is peculiar. For the Amish, pemmican isn't just a quirky experiment, it's a survival tool. Made by blending dried meat, rendered fat, and occasionally some dried berries, this concoction is dense enough to fuel anyone through a long, cold winter. It's not fancy, but it works. And when you're trying to store chicken for months on end without a fridge, that's all that really matters. While modern folks might see pemmican as a relic from survivalists or history buffs, it's still relevant for people who want to keep food simple, nutritious, and shelf-stable. The Amish are experts at making things last, and they've embraced pemmican's no-nonsense philosophy. High in calories and built to endure time, it's the food equivalent of an old pickup truck. Reliable, tough, and always there when you need it. Fur traders and explorers used it for a reason, after all. They couldn't afford spoiled food when trekking through unforgiving landscapes, just like the Amish can't afford waste when their winters roll in. Sure, offering someone a bite of chicken pemmican might raise an eyebrow or two, but the genius lies in its simplicity. A handful of it could power you through a morning of chopping firewood, milking cows, or just surviving another icy February. With every bite, you're tasting history. Because this method isn't just Amish ingenuity, it's a tradition passed down through generations of those who understood that sometimes the best way to prepare for tomorrow is by preserving today. You wouldn't think soaking chicken in vinegar would be the first idea that comes to mind when trying to keep it from spoiling. But for the Amish, vinegar pickling isn't just about adding a punch of tangy flavor. It's a smart, low-maintenance preservation technique. The acidic environment vinegar creates sends bacteria packing, leaving the chicken safe to eat for months. It's a little like giving your chicken a hostile marinade, one that says, "Bacteria? Not today." It might seem strange at first glance, but this trick has stood the test of time. During World War I, soldiers depended on pickled meat to survive the trenches, and the Amish keep that same practicality alive today. Sure, the idea of vinegary chicken might get a few raised eyebrows at the dinner table, but once you try it, it's hard not to appreciate how clever and tasty this method can be. Plus, if you've ever found yourself fishing moldy leftovers from the back of the fridge, you'll probably appreciate the brilliance of having chicken you can pull straight from a brine and eat without fear. Not everyone needs to be a fan of pickling, but when you're living off the land and convenience stores are hours away, you learn to see the genius in a jar of vinegar-soaked meat. And let's be honest, if soldiers could survive war zones with it, surely you can survive a curious glance or two when you tell folks your secret weapon against spoilage. When it comes to dehydration, the Amish aren't just making snacks, they're creating food that can stand the test of time. Drying chicken to the point that it becomes jerky isn't about making it taste good, although it does. It's about stripping away every last drop of moisture so bacteria don't stand a chance. Without water, those tiny spoilage-causing microbes wave the white flag and move on to mess with someone else's food. The beauty of dehydration lies in its simplicity. You hang the chicken to dry, sometimes in the sun or near a warm stove, and nature takes care of the rest. It's a bit like playing the slowest waiting game ever, but with delicious rewards at the end. No gas station jerky could ever compete with this old-school method. Properly dehydrated chicken isn't just a snack, it's a survival tool. In fact, travelers and soldiers for centuries carried dried meat, knowing it would stay good no matter where their journeys took them. There's something satisfying about knowing you can pack a piece of chicken in your bag and not worry about refrigeration. It's the kind of food prep that would make any modern-day prepper jealous. And once you've experienced the flavor of Amish jerky, it's hard to go back to the store-bought stuff. The real deal has a rugged charm, just like the people who make it. Imagine taking your freshly prepared chicken and covering it in a thick coat of lard. Sounds a bit unconventional, right? But this isn't just a culinary experiment. It's an ancient preservation method that the Amish still trust. Lard acts like a protective shield, blocking out air and bacteria, much like a medieval knight's armor. Once the chicken is sealed inside this fatty fortress, it can rest safely on a pantry shelf for months, no refrigeration needed. The beauty of lard sealing lies in its simplicity. You cook the chicken, pack it tightly, and pour melted lard over it until everything is completely submerged. As the fat cools, it solidifies into a sturdy barrier. That barrier isn't just functional, it also locks in the chicken's flavor, making each bite as tender and tasty as the day it was prepared. Back in the day, folks in Europe relied on this method when winter food shortages were a very real threat, and it still works like a charm. There's something oddly satisfying about using fat not just as food, but as a preservation tool. It's almost like tricking nature. And really, who wouldn't want to take advantage of a method where just add more fat is the solution? Plus, it's a little ironic. After all, in a world obsessed with low-fat everything, here's a trick that embraces fat to make food last longer. Sour milk preservation might sound like a culinary mishap, but for the Amish, it's a clever way to keep chicken fresh while adding a delicious twist. This method takes advantage of the natural fermentation process that occurs when milk is left to sour. By using sour milk or buttermilk, the chicken is marinated in a tangy, acidic solution that works wonders for both preservation and flavor enhancement. When chicken is submerged in sour milk, the lactic acid produced during fermentation creates an environment that discourages the growth of harmful bacteria. This means that the chicken remains safe to eat for a longer period compared to traditional methods. It's similar to the way yogurt preserves its freshness, thanks to those beneficial bacteria working their magic. Using sour milk for preservation isn't just functional, it also imparts a unique flavor to the chicken. The tanginess of the milk penetrates the meat, making it tender and juicy. Imagine biting into a piece of chicken that not only tastes fresh, but also has a hint of creaminess and a pleasant zing. It's like a secret ingredient that transforms a simple dish into something special. In addition to preservation, the sour milk method can be combined with various herbs and spices for an added layer of flavor. Marinating chicken in sour milk with garlic, rosemary, or paprika can create a mouth-watering dish that would impress anyone at the dinner table. This technique is a perfect example of how the Amish embrace resourcefulness and creativity in their food preservation methods. By using what's readily available, like sour milk, they not only ensure their chicken stays fresh, but also elevate its taste, making every meal a delightful experience. So next time you find yourself with leftover milk that's past its prime, don't toss it out. Consider using it to marinate some chicken. You might just discover a delicious way to preserve your food while enjoying the unique flavors that come with it. Freezing chicken in ice may seem like an oddball method of preservation, but it's just another day in the life of the Amish. When they think of ice, they don't just picture frosty drinks or snowmen, they see a fantastic way to keep their poultry fresh for months. This technique uses nature's very own freezer, ice. While many of us might struggle to make room for frozen dinners in our tiny freezers, the Amish take advantage of the cold temperatures outside, especially during winter. To start, they'll take fresh chicken and pack it tightly in a container, making sure to add a layer of ice all around it. The trick here is to ensure that the chicken is fully surrounded by ice, creating a cozy, icy cocoon. With the cold air trapping the chill, the chicken stays preserved just like it would in a modern freezer. Ice works by stopping bacteria in their tracks, preventing spoilage while locking in the chicken's flavors. Now, don't expect the Amish to just plop their chicken in a tub of ice and call it a day. Oh no, they know that packing the chicken snugly in ice isn't just practical. It's a bit of a science experiment. They often keep an eye on the temperature to make sure it stays consistently cold. If the ice melts too quickly, they might add more to keep their frosty fortress intact. It's like giving your chicken a spa day in the winter. You know how we all love a nice cold compress on a hot summer day? Well, for this chicken, it's all about chilling out until it's ready for dinner. Who knew a bird could enjoy a cold bath? This technique also comes with its own set of benefits. When chicken is frozen in ice, it retains its moisture and flavor. Unlike some of the frozen meats you might find in grocery stores, it's like taking a step back in time to when food wasn't loaded with preservatives, just the way nature intended. Plus, this method means the chicken is ready for cooking whenever the mood strikes. You could have a frozen chicken ready to go without the pesky need for a fridge. And speaking of fridges, did you know that in a survey conducted by the USDA, around 30 to 40% of the food supply in the United States goes uneaten? It's a staggering figure. While the Amish utilize ice to preserve their food, many of us waste perfectly good chicken that could have been saved if we just thought outside the ice box. Brining chicken is like giving it a cozy bath in a salty solution. And for the Amish, this method is a game changer. When it comes to preserving chicken, they don't just settle for the basics. They take things to the next level by creating a magic potion of salt and water that transforms plain poultry into a juicy, flavorful delight. Brining isn't just about adding salt, it's about enhancing the chicken's flavor and keeping it moist, making every bite feel like a gourmet experience. The process is pretty simple, yet effective. The Amish mix salt with water, sometimes adding a sprinkle of sugar or spices to jazz things up. Then, the chicken takes a long, relaxing soak in this salty goodness. As the chicken sits in the brine, it absorbs all those lovely flavors and moisture. You could say it's like a spa day for the bird, one that leaves it feeling pampered and deliciously plump. You might wonder why on earth you'd want to add more salt to chicken. Isn't salt bad for you? Well, in moderation, it's not the villain everyone makes it out to be. Plus, this isn't just about seasoning, it's about preservation too. The salt creates an environment where harmful bacteria have a tough time surviving, so the chicken stays fresh longer. This method has been around for centuries, dating back to times when refrigeration was as common as flying pigs. Truly a lifesaver for those living off the land. Now picture this. You're at a summer picnic and you've got a deliciously brined chicken dish on the table. Everyone's raving about how juicy it is, and you're sitting back, soaking in the compliments like a sunbather at the beach. That's the beauty of brining. It's all about elevating your chicken game, making it so irresistible that your guests might just start fighting over the last piece. Imagine Grandma's secret recipe being revealed in the heat of battle. Brining is not just for the Amish, of course. In fact, the art of brining has gained popularity in many kitchens across the world. A survey showed that about 73% of home cooks are now experimenting with brining their meats. With so many home cooks embracing this method, it's easy to see why brine chicken is becoming a must-have at family gatherings and holiday feasts. You could say it's catching on faster than a catchy tune on the radio. And let's not overlook the sheer versatility of brining. You can toss in herbs, spices, and even fruits to create a flavor explosion. Maybe a hint of rosemary for those fancy dinner parties, or a splash of citrus for a refreshing twist. In a world where refrigeration has become the norm, the Amish remind us that preserving chicken, and food in general, can be achieved through age-old methods rooted in nature and tradition. Their creative techniques not only ensure freshness, but also reflect a deep respect for the food they consume and the environment they inhabit.